There are plenty of people in the Conservative Party today who would be horrified at an amalgamation with reform. Not so much because of Nigel Farage, but because the other membership of his party.
Would it
Quite a few
horrify
thrown in.
you?
I would have, if Nigel had asked to join 6 weeks ago, I would have probably ticked yes. Bear in mind, I'm an old friend of Nigel's. Today, the man's trying to destroy the Conservative Party. That's his explicit aim. And when somebody tries to burn down the golf club, you don't offer them membership, do you?
We're going to hear from David Davis, senior Tory, former cabinet minister, and now a candidate once again. Good morning.
Morning.
I want to talk about the reality of policy. But how big a deal do you think immigration is in this election? How many people's votes do you think it's swaying?
Oh, less than most the commentators imagine. I mean, look, it's an important issue. Let's not get it wrong. But most people will make their decisions when they come to vote on the basis of much more domestic issues and immigration. Back in 2005, when I was Shadow Home Secretary, the Tory party had about a 35% lead on immigration policy. 85% of the public told pollsters it was the most important issue to them, or one of the most important. And it didn't move the polls by much at all, 0.5%, because most people were voting on economic matters, on their jobs, their tax, their future, and so on. So I think it'll be a big story in the election campaign, but it'll be slightly less in terms of its impact in terms of the actual vote.
So do you think, I suppose taking what you said there, is it the reason for reform's popularity, and maybe also the reason why reform won't get, huge numbers? They might get a lot of people voting for them, but they probably won't get lots of MPs.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, it's part. I mean, look, the reason for reform's popularity is a mixture of things. Immigration's the big symbolic one, but also, frankly, some of the division in the Tory party in the last year or so has been a feed into it as well. I mean, when I get a criticism on the doorstep, it used to be, when are you going to get your act together, about arguments amongst the Conservative Party over, for example, the Rwanda bill and so on. So, yeah, sure, it's a feeder to it. But you're right. I think Reform's going to be lucky to get one seat.
Yeah.
If that, even though they'll probably get 10% or more of the vote overall.
Do you get people on that point? Do you get people on the doorstep saying, "Why don't you just let Farage into the Tory party?" Does that come up at all? Do you think that would be a good move?
No, none at all. I mean, bear in mind, I have a more middle class seat than most, shall we say, and what I find is those people who have, there's one or two exceptions, but most people are thinking about reform almost talk themselves out of it in front of me. They say, well, I was thinking of voting reform, but that'll just help Labour, so I'm going to vote for you. Or I was thinking of voting reform, and I looked at you as our candidate, and so on. So there are a variety of reasons that they come back to us, which is why I think the outturn will be smaller than the poll in reform votes. Be smaller than the polls are saying. Very occasionally, we've had a really adamant, I hate the Tories type reform voter, and I mean hate. I mean not people who are just dissatisfied. Occasionally, but it's not, and they're not interested in any amalgamation between the parties. They're just atavistically against.
Yeah.
I also think, frankly, those who talk about it are not thinking. They say, "Oh, unify the right." Well, no, unify one small piece of the right. There are plenty of people in the Conservative Party today who would be horrified at an amalgamation with reform. Not so much because of Nigel Farage, but because the other membership of his party.
Would it horrify you?
I would have, if Nigel had asked to join 6 weeks ago, I would have probably ticked yes. Bear in mind, I'm an old friend of Nigel's. Today, the man's trying to destroy the Conservative Party. That's his explicit aim. When somebody tries to burn down the golf club, you don't offer them membership, do you?
Have you fallen out with him?
No, I still talk to him from time to time. Spoke to him about a week or two ago. I think probably the day before he announced he was going to do what he did.
Oh, interesting. Was he getting your take? Was he asking your advice?
No. We were disagreeing about something else.
Oh, I see.
I should have thought about it, shouldn't I?
Well, he took most of us by surprise. Let's talk about immigration, though, because, it is one of the policy areas that people do often want to have a bit more focus on. How likely do you think it is that the Rwanda policy, would be able to make a key difference here? Because one of the things that both Labour and the Tories have struggled to explain is what will happen to the tens of thousands of people who are living in hotels in the country right now. They've arrived here illegally. They obviously cannot all be sent to Rwanda, and no party seems to have a clear answer on that.
No, I started out as a skeptic about the Rwanda policy. As it turned out, indeed, I think I voted against the very first motion in the House. But I'm of the view, look, whatever we do, we have to stop people before they get to the channel. Once they get to the channel, the idea that we're going to be able to control that by policing action has not been successful pretty much anywhere in Europe. Because bear in mind, the Europeans are also trying to stop people across the Mediterranean unsuccessfully. You've got to stop them coming in the first place. Now, my concern in the first instance was whether it had an incentive effect, but we almost had an experiment in that, ironically, a few weeks ago. If you remember when the Irish got very upset that a lot of people, when the Rwanda bill got to fruition, all of a sudden, a lot of the illegal migrants were disappearing off to Ireland. So it does tell you it actually does have an incentive effect. So that's one component, but by itself, that would not be enough. It's not a question of removing all existing migrants. It's a question of stopping new ones arriving. And the second impact on that is quite interesting. And that is that we're now in the position where Germany, Denmark, Austria and Italy, well, Austria is actually even ahead of us, are now copying it. If effectively the whole of Europe follows us into a safe third country policy, which is what Rwanda is, then actually that will have a big incentive effect. It will alter the economic migrants, the pseudo asylum seekers, which I'm afraid are the majority of people coming.
But it doesn't. It still doesn't deal with the people who are here already, and we know that there's been a record number who've arrived over the last couple of months alone. And when I've asked the government about this, they said at the manifesto launch, advisors for the Tory party, all those people would go to Rwanda. Now that's almost 100,000 people, or they would be put into detention centres. Well, we don't even have enough space in the prison system at the moment for people who need to go to prison. That would be more than the prison population. What do you think the answer is? Is it an amnesty?
Well, it's no, absolutely not. The country that's tried amnesties in the past, roughly every 6 years, has been Italy. And what has happened is immediately after it's had the amnesty, it's got a new flood. Amnesties they sound rational, but they're very dangerous policies. And by the way, detention centres are not prisons; they're essentially camps. If we have to do that, we have to do that. But it's the issue of the primary issue on illegal immigration. We haven't even talked about legal migration, but the primary on illegal immigration is stopping the flow. And obviously some police action will have some impact, but you've got to basically take away the incentive or find some other source. The most successful policy that the current government has carried out. I had something to do with. I guess I designed it, which was the policy to stop Albanian coming, using the law to say Albania is a safe country. There's lots of argument. And that works. So you've got to be imaginative about finding mechanisms like that. But flow matters more than those who are here now. We can deal in time with those who are here now. But we wouldn't be able to if the flow kept going up and up as it has been.
So would a sort of a working relationship with Europe on immigration, almost an immigration council, would that work, do you think, given what you said about European nations looking to do something similar to Rwanda?
Well, the first thing, the difficulty is, even when we were within the EU, cooperation with the French was always grudging, always difficult. We had good days and bad days, shall we say. And the reason for that is not malice. It's because for every country, the migrants are a problem in Europe, right across Europe. Since a combination of things ranging from the second Iraq war through to Merkel saying Europe's open for migrants, we've got 1 million migrants in a year. Those things together have created a trade and a flow, which has proven very, very difficult to resolve for all of them. Now, if they all take a similar approach and say, if you come to Europe, you're going to end up in a country you don't intend ending up. It'll be a safe country, but it won't be the one you want. Then that will have an impact. And the reason I say that, in part, is because what happened when the policy got to royal assent here. As I say, people rushing off to Ireland and so on. It demonstrates actually it does have an impact, much more than I thought. I mean, it's ironic, really, how it happened, but it does have a much bigger impact than I'd allowed for.
I want to bring Madeleine Sumption in, and I know that we could talk at length. We're talking about illegal immigration here. We could talk about legal migration too. But just before I bring Madeleine in, how much of this do you think goes back to Brexit? Do you feel that people have been let down over the promises that were made there? Do you think because immigration was so tied up in Brexit, it was such a big part of that campaign. I mean, Rishi Sunak today is saying he's the original Brexiteer. Do you feel like people have been let down?
No, what I think has happened here is a couple of things together. I mean, first thing is, you're undoubtedly right. I mean, Brexit raised expectations of bringing migration under control. And there was a point to that. Don't forget that when we started the Brexit process and we were making arrangements to allow Europeans already here to stay, we thought it was 3 million. It turned out to be 6 million. So we actually had 3 million really undetected migrations of the UK because of being within the European Union and agreeing the Eastern Europeans coming early, something that started right back in the 2000s. So first thing, expectations quite understandably were high. Secondly, I think governments of all sorts and parties of all sorts underestimated the extent to which British industry in particular is dependent on migrant labour. I mean, way back, I mean, you remember David Cameron saying about tens of thousands of migrants. He based that on the fact that we got by on tens of thousands of migrants before 97. But what happened was a surge in them, and both the industry and to some extent the Treasury have sort of assumed it's a necessity for growth. It's not, but it requires not just a change of immigration strategy, it requires a change of economic strategy. It requires all the big companies to start investing in higher productivity rather than hoping to just buy in cheap labor. So that it's underway. That process is changing. It's one of the reasons I think the Conservative Party is now talking about putting every year's legal migration limits to Parliament, because it'll put it in the public domain. It's not been there before, and big issues which relate to it, like that, but also like migration from Hong Kong, migration from the Ukraine, approved migration I'm talking about here, migration of ex-Afghan soldiers back here, which most of the public agree with. I mean, that's added, I don't know, a third of a million or more, maybe 500,000, but certainly more than a third of a million to our migration numbers. And I think people, if they thought about it, would approve of those things.
I want to ask you finally, it's a slightly cheeky question, but I can't let you go without playing something back to you that you said on Matt Chorley in April, so not that long ago. Have a quick listen to this.
I think the government would be off its head to do that. And he's right. I mean, it's going to go distant, sometime November, maybe even December, to allow some of the economic improvements to come through. So no, it would be a suicidal thing to do in political terms.
That was your response to the prospect of a summer election. What do you make of the decision to call one?
Well, if I was being sneaky, I'd say it was a response to a May election, but I'll take the point. The same argument applies. Well, I mean, I took the view. I mean, we have an improving economic circumstance. Inflation's come down in a way which would have impressed Margaret Thatcher than anybody else. Growth's improving. Job prospects are improving. A whole load of things are improving. And I thought that the sensible thing to do was to wait it out, let people see the result. Because one of the difficulties today is trust in politicians, trust in politics of all parties is reduced. And so making the promise is not enough, even if you deliver on it. Yeah. Actually, people seeing it is enough. And that's why I said what I said. I don't demur from it. I think that no, I might demur from the phrasing, but I don't demur from the logic. That the truth is, it would have been easier in November, but he made his decision for whatever reason, I don't know. But I mean, Rishi's a very honourable, decent man, and maybe he thought this clamour for an election had gone on long enough. I don't know. You'll have to ask him, not me, really. I didn't make the decision.
I'll give it a good go this week. David Davis, thanks for joining us.